You are listening to the We Are West Ham podcast with me, Will Pugh, and we are fresh off the back of the opening day defeat against Aston Villa. Julen Lopetegui's new era started with a bang. Hope you enjoyed the podcast with me and James earlier this week. I'm delighted to say that, as promised, joining me once again to look ahead this time to the Crystal Palace away game on the weekend is friend of mine, friend of the show, a sports journalist with The Athletic, a massive Eagles fan, Max Molyneux. Maxie, lovely to speak to you again, mate. Disappointing starts to the season for both of us, although yours felt like it came with a bit more of a robbery, whereas ours was well and truly deserved.
Yeah, it's one of those. I felt like we deserved a bit more from the game. But what can you do? I think most people who watch that even neutrals might say that we were a little bit hard done by. But you just got to hope that it kind of evens itself out over the course of the season. Obviously, on Saturday I was spitting feathers, so to speak. But
yeah,
a couple of days, like, the anger dies down, doesn't it? So
yeah. So 2-1 defeat to Brentford. For anyone not sure, Eberechi scores a screamer of a free kick, catches the goalie out off his line, and then Nathan Collins judged to have fouled Will Hughes. Will Hughes judged to have fouled Nathan Collins, but if anything, I think that was probably a Freudian slip from me there. It looked like the other way round, if you ask me. Collins kind of pulled him and then goes down.
Yeah,
the referee
100%.
blows a bit prematurely. Mark Halsey said that the former Premier League referee said it was far too much of a premature whistle. Goal should have stood. How were Palace fans feeling about that and the opening performance as a whole?
A little bit mixed, because I think while we did sort of dominate in terms of chances, it felt like, and Edouard had a goal disallowed for a kind of a fractional offside, still offside, but fractional nonetheless. And their second goal was a little bit fortuitous in the way that it kind of bobbled through to Wissett as well. I think there's kind of a recognition that on most days, maybe 7 out of 10, we would win that match based on how it went and the kind of balance of play. So it's not too disheartening. It is only the first game of the season, and obviously we've had a lot of players come back off really busy summers. Daniel Munoz and Jefferson Lerma reached the final of the Copa America with Colombia. Obviously, really hot temperatures and kind of grueling matches over there. Eze was in the England squad right up to the final. Mateta was in the Olympics only very recently and reached the final as well. And so we've had a lot of kind of players away with their countries during the summer, and so we haven't really had a full season. Mateta was taken off at halftime. That was a physical issue, I think, and a couple of others maybe didn't look quite up to speed, having not had a full pre-season. And so there are kind of mitigating factors, but equally it's disappointing given that Brentford looked kind of pretty poor for most of the game, especially without Ivan Toney, and that they will probably be one of the sides in lower mid-table. And if Palace have kind of genuine aspirations of going beyond kind of 9th, 10th, which at the start of the season some fans did, with some justification, then you need to be kind of beating teams like Brentford, or at least getting points even away.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? It's that little mini league, sort of as cliche as people like to talk about. Yeah, you are like Palace are definitely in that with Brentford, aren't they? And I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you say, if the performance probably at least warranted a point, you kind of go, all right, first game of the season, it's annoying, but if you can put it behind you, then great. But what were your thoughts on the summer overall then? You mentioned what some Palace fans thinking going into the season. You lost Elise, of course, but what are your general thoughts on the summer as a whole and your transfer business so far? If anyone who doesn't know, what are your ins and outs?
Yeah. So it's been a little bit up and down. Obviously, I think that most Palace fans knew that this would be the summer that Elise went. He obviously signed a big contract last summer, which Steve Parish kind of announced in a very funny and shocking way on Instagram, where most people were expecting him to go to Chelsea. But as part of that contract, there was a release clause included, which was quite achievable, kind of considering his talent. And so it wasn't really much of a surprise that he went this summer.
What was the release clause?
I think it was around 63 million, something like that.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
Palace got about 50 from that, bearing in mind kind of sell-on clauses and that kind of thing that went to Reading. But considering we signed him for 8 million from the Championship, which was absurdly low figure, kind of considering how good he was, I think it's a good move all round, and he gets a really good chance at a club which is kind of befitting of his talent, as opposed to like Newcastle, who are who are after him as well. So that was obviously a shame, and it's really tough to replace a player like that because, I really think he is world class. He was the best of the Palace players, at least in terms of talent, and it's almost impossible to kind of sign another player who's exactly like that. So to kind of borrow a Moneyball phrase, you have to sort of recreate him in the aggregate, if that makes sense. You have to try and get maybe 2 or 3 different players who can kind of bring some of the skills that he has. So we signed Ismail Assar from Marseille after a bit of a disappointing one season at Marseille after moving from Watford, and he kind of brings a bit of the pace and directness and the dribbling. And then we signed Daichi Kamada on a free transfer from Lazio, attacking midfielder. He worked with Oliver Glasner, our manager at Eintracht Frankfurt, won the Euro.
I've seen him play Kamada for Frankfurt a couple of times. He is tidy. He's a really good player.
Yeah. And so on a free, it's a decent deal because you might expect to pay 15 million, maybe upwards, for a player like that if he's under contract. And so he looked quite good. He was neat and tidy passing, like good movement. I think maybe a couple of the Palace players weren't quite on his wavelength in terms of kind of finding his runs and that kind of thing. And so that meant that he was sort of it looked like he was running around aimlessly. But I think when players get used to him, that he'll be like
that'll come, won't it?
Starter for us. Yeah, it'll come in time. And the prospect of him kind of linking up with Eze and maybe a fully fit Mateta in future is quite good as well. We also signed Chadi Riyad from Barcelona / Real Betis. Bit of a complicated one because they both kind of owned his rights. Betis got him on like a loan obligation to buy.
Sounds a bit dodgy. That sounds a bit Carlos Tevez, Javier Mascherano vibes.
Kind of deals, isn't it? Yeah. And he's a young centre back. He played about 25 times in La Liga for Betis last season. Impressed. Obviously, we've got him at a little bit of a knockdown price because of Barcelona's kind of well-documented financial issues. And he is a kind of left-sided centre-back, which is where Mark Gay plays, perhaps in anticipation that Mark Gay might go.
Yeah, of course,
Regarding our transfer window in general, I'll try not to rub it on too much, but I think a lot of it will depend on what happens over the next sort of week or so, because obviously we've been rejecting Newcastle's bids for Gay, who's a fantastic player.
Sounds like that's edging closer to like an inevitable sale, though, doesn't it?
I now suspect, given that we've accepted a bid for Joachim Andersen from Fulham, who's also a centre-back, that we will sell Andersen and that will keep Gay for one more year, and that will sell him next summer. I think so. I don't think they'll want to sell both in the same window. I mean, they might be forced into it if Newcastle offer 70 million, but I now get the sense that Newcastle are kind of exploring different options because they don't want to go above their last offer, which was knocked back. And I can't see both of them going in the window unless someone pays
if it very much felt sort of like an inevitable one now. I know Palace were digging their heels in negotiating like tough as you would hope with a star player like that. Did really well for England over the summer. I was really impressed with him actually. But the Andersen one's odd. How much will you get for Andersen? Has he got long left on his contract or?
So he has, I think, 2 years left on his contract. So it was coming to the point where if he was maybe unwilling to renew it, it might like next summer would be the real crunch time where we would have to sell him at maybe a bit of a knockdown price, which is what we want to pay. But
how much will you get from this time round from Fulham then?
I think it's around 30 million with add-ons.
Yeah, that's it. That seems a bit of a strange one. If they're talking, it was like 73 million or whatever for correct me if I'm wrong, but for Gahey, you'd have thought, and like Anderson's a tidy player, isn't he? Not perhaps to the level of Gahey or whatever, but he's a decent player for you. Are you surprised that that's the sale they've sanctioned rather than the other one?
Yes and no. So I think Gay is a better player, and he really showed his class when he was playing at the Euros. I thought he was one of England's best players. Yeah, really, really excellent. And I think he's destined for the top. And so before too long, he won't be a Palace player anymore. But towards the end of last season, he was out injured for 2 or 3 months with a serious injury. And Palace went on a really fantastic run of form with Anderson playing regularly and actually taking the captain's armband. He really marshalled us brilliantly away at Anfield when we won 1-0. We obviously beat United 4-0. West Ham, sorry to mention, at Selhurst Park, 5-2, I think. And then Aston Villa 5-0 on the last day of the season. And I thought, I recognise and appreciate how good Mark Gay is. But I think that if we can get those kind of results without him in the team, then, it's a kind of necessary evil to sell him. And you can keep Anderson, who's sort of playing with his powers. And so but then on the other hand, I feel like Joachim Andersen, he's maybe I'm reading a little too much into it. He's only 28 years old, but it feels like he's losing a little bit of his pace. He had a bit of a shoddy pre-season, which Michail Antonio profited from in the Stateside Cup when Anderson played a really rubbish back pass and Antonio scored.
That's probably likely the only way Michail Antonio will score these days, I think, is if it's literally put on a plate for him by the opposition. Yeah,
exactly. But his preseason was a bit up and down. He's looked a little bit slower and a little bit kind of ponderous. He made a bit of a rash sliding tackle against Brentford and got booked, and then was kind of walking on eggshells for the rest of the game. And a couple of times he looked a bit vulnerable against the pace of Brentford's forwards and Burma and Wissa. And
what you're saying then, Max, is you're quite glad Palace are probably thinking, "We'll take the money before anyone notices."
Yeah, potentially, because I think if you were really watching us recently, over pre-season in that first game, you might think, I'm not sure, he's looked a bit shaky. Whereas obviously his previous seasons he's been so good, and his long passing, diagonal passes is such an amazing weapon. And he is a good player on his day, definitely.
But Gay, his market value's not, like, his reputation's not exactly going to fade if he has a few dodgy weeks, is it, Gay? He's really like something bad will have to happen for you not to get. I see what you mean. It makes a bit more sense. So, what are you thinking about the game this weekend? Selhurst Park's a proper strange one. Like, it doesn't feel like it's a happy hunting ground for West Ham at all. It's one of those games I think West Ham fans, me included, are always guilty of looking forward to and being, I've already, there's only probably, a handful of away games every season. Probably half of them you play as a West Ham fan, maybe, where you think, we've got half a chance of getting a win here. Like, realistically, West Ham will probably win 6 to 7 away games a season, probably in a mediocre season or whatever. So you think, Palace, I always mark that down as if you'd fancy it. And then, obviously we had a couple of decent ones under Lanzini, but actually, the more I think about it, I feel like we just get humped all the time. How are you feeling about the game? Are you confident?
Well, I'm glad Lanzini's not playing for you anymore.
Yeah. It's all he used to do is bang 80% of his season's goals against Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I was there at Selhurst for that incredible goal.
Well, he teed it up with his left and volleyed it with his right.
Yeah,
amazing.
You have to appreciate that. Kind of finish. It feels like we always get goal of the season contenders against us at Selhurst. If you remember, Kasami scored an absolute worldie. Fulham player volleyed it over Sproni. There was another amazing goal in that game. I think Sidwell or Berbatov, and then Defoe scored like a Van Basten volley.
Yeah. People just turn it on.
So I look forward to Fulkrug smashing it in from 55.
Yeah. But how do you think the game's going to go? Because it's a bit of a strange one. Don't know if you caught our game or not, but obviously Villa are good, and that does get overlooked. Villa are good. Load of our fans who were, spewing hatred about David Moyes wanting him out were really pleased that we had 52% possession, not apparently too phased by the fact that we lost the game and have 0 points. But me and James talked about it on the podcast earlier this week. I wasn't convinced, really. I know it's early days, but all we appeared to do was push up higher up the pitch. It was kind of the extent of the new tactical revolution. But what are you feeling? How do you think the game will go star-wise? Are you confident of your beloved Eagles getting a win?
I'm going to sit on the fence, which probably isn't that
We're
interesting.
podcast friendly,
Yeah.
as you know. Yeah, I won't be clipping this up for socials.
But I feel fairly optimistic, given that our home form, especially at the end of last season, was very strong. And I think what might dictate how well you do is how well Daniel Munoz does at right wing back, because last season he linked up really well with Elise. And it just felt they had a really nice balance between them, of Elise cutting on his left foot, and then Munoz would kind of steam down the overlap on the outside, and that would kind of hold the width, but also kind of give two players for opposition defenses to think about. Whereas one of the main issues against Brentford is the fact that Kamada was playing as the right-sided number 10 kind of attacking midfielder. And again, good player, but he drifts quite centrally. He doesn't really want to be, getting out on the touchline with chalk on his boots. And that meant that Brentford could kind of tack their defence over quite easily. And that when Munoz would be going forward, and actually his back post header from across set up our goal. But when he would kind of bomb forwards, he would be the only one, and it would be quite isolated. And so I feel like maybe we need to get the balance right, whether that's by starting Ismail Assar, maybe, who might provide a bit more natural width, or maybe by encouraging Kamada to kind of mix up his runs between wide and centrally. But I'm fairly optimistic. I think that having one of Doucouré or Lerma back in central midfield, Doucouré was out with a long-term injury and we're kind of easing him back, and Lerma obviously had the Copa America as well, and they both started on the bench against Brentford with Will Hughes playing, who's a decent squad player, but not really that good at kind of dictating play in the middle. He's not very mobile or dynamic. And if Doucouré or Lerma is fit to play in central midfield, that makes a massive difference in how solid we look, because we have someone with the kind of pace and mobility to get around and kind of scoop up the loose balls and then kind of protect our back three, who aren't really the quickest. Gay is a fantastic player, but isn't, outright really pacey. Richards can look a bit slow at times, so can Anderson. So I wonder that maybe with transfer rumours around, obviously, Gay and Anderson, whether Chadi Riyad might make his debut, who's naturally a little bit quicker. And I think having Lerma or Doucouré in central midfield will make a big difference as well. With regards to West Ham, I think where you can hurt us is kind of pace in attack and out wide.
Oh dear.
So maybe
I'm just trying to think
Hill
whether Mikel Antonio or Danny Ings would be best placed to provide that. Goodness sake. Yeah, sorry, mate. Go on, carry on. We can hurt you with pace.
Yeah, possibly if Somerville starts, or maybe
Kudus, Bowen, they're no slouches. So I mean, look, fair enough, Max. It's just one of those awkward ones, really. Just really briefly before we wrap up, what are West Ham fans getting in Aaron Wan-Bissaka? Obviously, I think his time at United has left most people just going, I think he's the epitome in most people's minds of a 6 out of 10. Like, nothing objectively bad, but nothing really amazing either. What are West Ham fans getting from your experience when he was at Palace?
Remind me what the fee was. It was about 15 million, something.
15 million quid. Yeah.
I think he's a really good player, and obviously I'm biased because of my my Palace connections. But when he broke through, bearing in mind he was like a raw kind of 19 or 20-year-old from the academy who basically never played a game in senior football before. I think his first 4 games were like Tottenham, Man United, Arsenal, and like 3 or 4 like big teams, and he came out of those tests really well. And actually his infamous lack of ability on the ball, or lack of attacking ability, which was kind of criticized while he was at Man United, I thought he was very good on the ball when in that first season when he broke through at Palace, and he was our player of the season that year. And that was the year when Saha was doing a madness and was the only one who's going to score goals for us, and still this young kid was our player of the season in the Premier League, which is no small matter. Obviously at United,
Eagle of the Year, is that what that award is called? Ours is the Hammer of the Year. Is yours the Eagle of the Year?
I don't think so. I think it's just called something very prosaic, like
Palace
Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Not much imagination goes into it.
Yeah, best footballer at Crystal Palace award. All right.
Yeah, you should take over the naming rights. But
Yeah, fair
when
enough.
he went to United, I think he's quite a shy, kind of introverted guy, and moving away from London for the first time, from his family for the first time, going from Palace, where you're kind of a bit in a goldfish bowl,
Yeah,
to the heights of Old Trafford and the massive kind of pressure and expectation of a young guy, early 20s, going there, and United being very open, which in retrospect wasn't a very good idea, being very open about the fact they had a shortlist of about 600 right backs and narrowed it down to him. That kind of pressure for someone just isn't
great, is it?
really helpful in helping them get off to a good start. Obviously, United have incredible, and still do have incredible, kind of structural problems at the club. And he was playing at a time and kind of making his way at a time when no players came out with like real massive credit. And so, yeah, I mean, he's not Cafu. He's not going to be like storming down the right wing and getting you 15 assists in a season, but he's an incredible one-on-one defender, arguably one of the best in the Prem,
Yeah,
in the entire division. And he's perfectly serviceable, decent, getting forward and crossing and passing and on the ball, which he's actually improved a little bit. So for 15 million, I don't think you could say fairer than that. He's probably on a fair
yeah,
whack of wages,
yeah.
but
I think that's the problem. Yeah.
with losing Ben Johnson and then obviously Sofal being kind of towards maybe the latter stages of his career, I think it's a decent
I do
sign.
think. I think it's an odd one. I think I don't think he's going to add loads more than Sufal or detract loads more, because I think Sufal's a consummate pro. I think he's great. But I think it's 4 years younger. It's a bit of future proofing, so it's decent. Right, Maxie, you've been absolutely brilliant as usual. Max Matthews, Crystal Palace fan and a sports journalist with The Athletic. There, before we let you go, Matthews, just quickly, what's the score going to be Saturday? West Ham v Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park.
I'm going to say 2-1 Crystal Palace, because we're not going to keep a clean sheet, but I back us to win.
2-1 to Crystal Palace. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I got a horrible feeling you might be right, I'm afraid. If we can get a point, at least just 1 point on the board before we play City the week after, that would be ideal. Because I don't fancy 3 games, 3 defeats. Listen, Max, been absolutely brilliant as always. Thanks very much to Max for joining us. Thank you very much to you lot for listening at home and or watching. The Eagles ahead on Saturday for West Ham before Man City the week after. So me and Jonesy will be back as usual early next week. Do me a favour if you haven't already. Do the usual. Follow us on all our social platforms at @WeAreWest Ham on Twitter. We Are West Ham Pod on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go and watch my exclusive interview with Harry Redknapp on there if you haven't done that already. We're on TikTok and loads of other random social media accounts that James sets up for us as well. So just search We Are West Ham on all your platforms. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for listening, everyone. West Ham are massive. Up the Hammers, and we'll speak to you next week.